Welcome to session 4. And as we all just got a notice, we will be recording today's session. And just so you know, the flow of the day will sort of go from breakout rooms into panel discussion back into breakout rooms, and the breakout rooms will not be recorded. It's just here today. So with that, I'm going to kick things off. Good morning. My name's Ashley Rude. I'm co-director of Oregon Climate and Agriculture Network. Love seeing the introductions coming through the chat. Please keep those going. Welcome to session 4 of our October 2022 Climate Resilience Training for Oregon Ag Professionals. Today, we'll be talking about policy and market drivers for climate resilience. Thanks to all who were able to join the previous workshops. I really appreciate the positive feedback we've been getting from attendees via our anonymous form. And for those of you who are generous enough to send us emails about your experience, keep those emails coming and let us know what's not working for you as well. We will have a formal evaluation after all these workshops are done and look forward to the feedback there. For folks who have missed any of our other 3 sessions, you can check out recordings and resources in our Google Drive. And Emmerich, when you get a chance, if you could pop in the link to the Google Drive so that folks know where to go for resources, that would be great. So today we're gathered in the Zoom room with colleagues from across the state and even some from further afield to take time each Wednesday to bring the idea of climate resilience on Oregon's farms and ranches into focus. For those of you who've attended the earlier sessions, you've heard this before, but I feel like it's really important to remember why we're here doing these workshops. We're here because we cannot do this work of climate resilience alone. We can't do this within our usual boxes, disconnected, one agency over there, nonprofits over here, and researchers somewhere else. We need to connect. We're gathered here to do just that, to create a community of practice dedicated to supporting farming and ranching for climate resilience in Oregon. We're looking to make resilience tangible and accessible over this series with both place-based knowledge and science guiding the way. And we've also heard that you all want place-based information, tools, and to get to know your partners in your region. So as we've done every session before this, we'll do again today, and we'll have facilitated regional breakout rooms for conversation and problem solving. I'm thankful that one of our planning team members, Gordon Jones, put together the slides that opened up this session. They're a great way to visualize who's in the room with us, since we can't all meet each other today. There's folks from universities, from OSU Extension, from Oregon Natural Resource Conservation Service, from soil and water conservation districts and nonprofits. A lot of you are working at the statewide level, and of course, many of you in the Willamette Valley. Thank you all for the work that you do. Thank you for being ready to meet and interact with your colleagues today. I'm so grateful for the depth of knowledge in this room. During workshops as we gather, let's embrace some grounding agreements. Let's all gather with respect for others by listening with curiosity. Let's speak from our own personal experiences, and let's allow time for others to share. Please keep your screen on with the Zoom as much as possible and keep yourself muted when appropriate. Please feel free to use the chat box for questions and conversation relevant to what we're talking about today. And if you want a reminder of what we'll cover today, our agenda is online in a link. And thanks to Jesse for monitoring the chat today. If you get a chance to put up that agenda, that would be great. You'll see again that we'll be flowing through breakout rooms and panel discussions. And just wanted to say a big thank you to the interdisciplinary team that helped me pull off this Western SARE funded program in collaboration with OSU Extension. Just as we all need an interdisciplinary community of practice to move farming for climate resilience forward in Oregon, I needed this team to put this together. If my planning team folks could raise your hands in your video or use, the chat, thank you so much for your help in putting this together. And thanks again to you all for attending. I know it's not easy to carve out time for learning and building community. We really can't do this alone. And with that, I think we're going to go into our first breakout rooms. For those of you who have attended before, we go into quick breakout rooms for about 5 minutes just so you can meet one other person. And when you go into that breakout room, it would be great if you could introduce yourself, your name, affiliation, and location, and answer the question, what is something you're interested in hearing about from one of today's speakers? So just share what you're interested in hearing from the speakers today. And I think with that, if Emmerich, if you're ready to send us into breakout rooms, We'll have just 5 minutes for you all to connect and meet each other. Welcome back, everybody. I'm starting to see the folks coming back into the room. If you get a chance, I'd love to see in the chat a little note about what you heard from the person that you talked with about what they want to hear from our speakers today. Yeah. Oh, folks are still slowly coming in. Welcome back to the main room. Hope everyone was able to have a good conversation. We'd love to hear in the chat what you heard from the person that you talked with about what they wanted to hear from our speakers if you get a chance. Thanks for participating. With that, I'm going to introduce our panel today. I'm so excited for our topic today, policy and market drivers for resilience, looking at the more systemic context that can provide opportunities and barriers for increased implementation of conservation practices. We are in an era of really increased interest in climate resilience, both at the federal and state levels and policy. And following close behind is development of new ecosystem service markets. I think as we reflect on these developments, it's really important to ask ourselves who's benefiting from these new opportunities and who are they built on? As the speakers present, please put your questions for them in the chat as they're speaking. Thanks again to Jessie for monitoring the chat. She'll bring them in after each speaker. We'll be talking today about opportunities and development at the state level, current financial incentives from the federal government, and we'll get a take from Sustainable Northwest on where and how markets may work or not for rangeland managers. And finally, if there's time, I'll provide a quick snapshot of my own experience in learning about carbon credit potential for producers. I'm excited to kick things off with Megan Kemple. Megan Kemple founded ORCAN in 2017 with 20 years of nonprofit experience focused on supporting Oregon's ag community. Megan coordinates ORCAN's policy work, advocating for policies and programs at the state and federal levels to advance climate resilience on Oregon's farms and ranches. And with that, Megan, if you want to get going, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. It's going to take me a moment to just get the right view for you. So let me do that. There we go. And then, is that working? Okay. I'm going to share about a healthy soils bill to be introduced in the 2023 legislative session in Oregon. We'll walk through why a healthy soils bill, ORCAN's approach and process, what's in the bill, and what's next and how you can engage. So first, why a healthy soils bill? As we've been hearing over the last several weeks during these sessions, healthy soils are a foundation for climate resilience for farmers. We know that farmers and ranchers need support and resources. We know that farm service providers need more resources to provide that support. And why state level policy? State level policy and legislation can provide significant resources to increase adoption of soil health practices. And we'll talk about how when we dive into the bill. I'm going to share about ORCAN's approach and process. So we've done extensive listening with technical assistance providers, producers, and partners working to advance climate resilience on Oregon's farms and ranches. And we used that. Ashley did extensive listening session and used that information to create a report, Lay of the Land and Levers for Change, Farming for Climate Resilience in Oregon and Beyond, 2021 and beyond. And many of you have probably seen that report or heard her share about it. We also held policy-focused listening sessions and used all of that feedback to develop ORCAN's policy recommendations. In addition, we engaged with the Oregon Global Warming Commission on their natural and working lands work, which includes forests, blue carbon, which includes wetlands and estuaries, as well as agriculture, so Oregon's farms and ranches. We are, of course, we're focused on that agriculture piece. And we're now ready to advance policy. We're ready to advance healthy soils policy. And We're going to do that building on the success of other states. There are many other states that have healthy soils policies in place, and ORCAN is well connected to a network of them. So we've used their best practices and lessons learned to inform our approach. One of the lessons learned and best practices is that we are focusing on soil health and rather than climate. In our messaging and our framing, we are focusing on soil health principles rather than specific practices. And you have been hearing about the soil health principles, I think, during the second session of the Train the Trainer sessions. Our approach also is a comprehensive policy. So the bill that we've proposed or laying out is a comprehensive policy, including technical assistance, outreach and education, research, and financial incentives with interagency collaboration. And in our advocacy efforts, we're engaging across the agriculture community, from Friends of Family Farmers advocating for small farms to the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts, working with soil and water conservation districts, and the Oregon Farm Bureau, for example. So really trying to engage broadly to get buy-in and support at this point and feedback on the structure and content of the bill so that everyone's on board and we have something that works across the ag community. What's in the bill? So we've got whereas statements which tell us or provide some inspiration and political motivation about why we need this policy, direction to create a soil health initiative, creation of an advisory committee, soil health advisory committee, description of the interagency collaboration, and then specific roles for each of the entities involved, and then a soil health roadmap. And I'll walk through each of these pieces next. So the whereas statements in a bill are not binding, they don't become part of statute, but they provide inspiration and political motivation for the legislature for passing the bill. So some of the whereas statements in the draft right now are that Oregon's ag community, Oregon's agriculture is a key economic sector. Increasing soil health practices can increase agriculture's economic resilience and profitability. Healthy soils provide plant and animal health benefits as well as environmental benefits. Healthy soils can make farms and ranches more resilient to drought and extreme weather events. And more lately, related to that, legislators want to promote resilience, drought resilience over disaster relief. So they're interested in, rather than just doling out funding when crops fail, they're also interested in looking at drought resilience. So soil health, a healthy soils bill fits really well there and can really address that need to promote drought resilience on Oregon's farms and ranches. We know that voluntary incentives are needed to advance healthy soils practices and that we need to leverage federal funding that's coming. The bill creates a soil health initiative, and the purpose of the initiative is to promote and support farming and ranching systems to improve soil health in Oregon. The goals of the initiative would be to promote agricultural viability and environmental functions. So twofold goals there. The strategies that are included in the initiative are advancing the initiative would advance voluntary incentive-based strategies, including these buckets: financial incentives, outreach and education, technical assistance, resources, and research. The initiative would be a collaboration between Oregon Department of Ag, Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, or OWEB, Oregon Association of Conservation Districts, and the Soil and Water Conservation Districts themselves, Oregon State University, both Extension and the College of Ag Sciences, and hopefully the Intertribal Agriculture Council as well. I'm going to just pause a second and explain that I am just in the phase right now of drafting a legislative concept, which which will be introduced, but that the bill language is still in flux as we're getting feedback, and we don't know how much it will be changed in this process. But so I'm going to just refer to the bill would, because the bill will not do anything unless it passes. But we are also pretty confident. I'm feeling really good about the work and collaboration. So feeling very optimistic that it will pass in some form. So continuing. So what would that collaboration include? It would include the agencies and entities consulting, collaborating, coordinating with each other, assessing and filling programmatic gaps and needs, and using available data from existing soil health baseline assessments, inventories, and tools. And then those agencies and entities building their own capacities as well as the capacities of others. The Department of Ag would have primary responsibility for coordinating the initiative and would be responsible for partnerships, identifying funding sources, and for marketing. Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, or OWEB, would be responsible for grant making, funding soil health practices through the Oregon Ag Heritage Program grants, and providing technical assistance grants to soil and water conservation districts. The soil and water conservation districts would be responsible for applying for those grants for land managers to implement soil health practices, and for receiving technical assistance grants themselves to provide that TA and resources. Then also providing the technical assistance and outreach and education. And the TA, technical assistance and outreach and education, is specified to be in collaboration with OSU Extension, not necessarily that there would need to be close coordination, but just acknowledging that both OSU and soil and water conservation districts do that piece. So that's clarified in the section about OSU's work, which is responsible for research and soil testing, and then technical assistance with the soil and water conservation districts and outreach and education with the districts as well. And then we're hoping to have inclusion of the Intertribal Agriculture Council, which would provide technical assistance for tribal producers. And this was a recommendation from Indigenous producers in ORCAN's network. The bill would also direct the collaborating agencies and entities to develop a soil health roadmap, which would be a plan for strategies and actions to advance soil health. Would need to be completed in the first year with input from a soil health advisory committee. And what's next? The legislative session starts January 17th and goes through June. So January through June of 2023. So in the next couple of months, during November and December, we work on finalizing the bill language with the folks at the state who are drafting the bill, and then get the bill introduced in January. Representative Helm is our chief sponsor of the bill, and then work to advocate for the bill over the session. That would include hearings, public hearings, meetings with legislators, and encouraging the ag community to let their legislators know that how important this is and that they want to see this bill implemented. And so some opportunities for you all to engage are that you can keep informed about ORCAN's policy work. Either Ashley or Emmerich will be sending out a survey after the sessions are over, and you can indicate, and we'll provide a place to indicate in that survey if you're interested in engaging in ORCAN's policy work. And then if you are, you can share out the opportunities that we share for producers to engage. So passing opportunities on to producers that you work with, and advocate as you're able. I understand that some of you may have restrictions on your ability to lobby for legislation, and hope you'll advocate as you're able. And I think do we have time for questions, Ashley?
We do, yeah. We've got several minutes for questions.
And there's a couple, Megan. So the first is, what are the headwinds to passage of the soil health bill and who is against?
Let's see, no one is indicating opposition to the bill right now. We're working with everybody that I can think of to talk through the structure of the bill and any concerns. So no one is opposed to the bill right now that we're aware of. There have been concerns about the structure, and I've addressed those and reworked the structure of the program to address them. And we'll check in to see if that works for everybody that gave me feedback. And in terms of headwinds, I'm getting lots of feedback from partners about different pieces to include, different initiatives that could be advanced through the bill, and the budget, the cost will be the headwind, I would say. So the more we add, the more the bill costs, and the more the legislature has to work to find that funding. So the challenge will be the balance between getting something done, and I think pretty confident that we can create a soil health initiative, get interagency collaboration, and create a roadmap. And then we have kind of a wish list of things that each of the entities would do. And it's unclear whether we probably won't get our whole wish list. So that list could be scaled back. I do expect that we may get some level of financial incentive through the Oregon Ag Heritage Program grants. We'll try to keep that at the top of the wish list. And I think that, yeah, that's what I can share there.
So there was a follow-up question, which is what the current thinking is on the budget, before I go on to another one.
I am not sure if that person is asking about the current thinking on the budget, the statewide budget right now, or this bill's fiscal, but I'll just address both. So the statewide budget, we know that the state agencies submitted their what are called agency request budgets to the governor's office about a month ago, and they've all been asked to cut them, to scale them back. And so we know that there will need to be some cuts there, and that's a signal to me that we're not going to get our wish list, our full wish list, that we're going to need to scale that back as well. And the fiscal impact for this bill hasn't been determined yet. We're just in communication with the agencies to try to determine how much money they would need to do the pieces that we have laid out.
Okay. What do you hope would be the implementation timeline after the bill is passed?
We have included what's called an emergency clause, which says the bill should be implemented immediately. A soil health initiative may not technically be an emergency, but we all know that it is critical to advancing this work and to advance climate resilience. And so the work would start immediately. And the soil health roadmap would have to be done within a year. All of the other work would start immediately upon the budget biennium beginning, which would be July 1.
Ashley, do we still have some more time? Because there's a couple more questions. Okay. Has OACD been engaged on this at all?
Yes. So I'm working closely with Jan Lee, Executive Director at OECD, and she's been giving me regular feedback. And I will be presenting at the OECD annual conference next week about the bill and working very closely. I'm hoping that OECD will be a close partner in our advocacy efforts.
And then, okay, so the next one is kind of a comment into a question, which is about HB 1534 not passing, and that it was potentially because OFB didn't support it. So how is the temperature for their support this time?
You know, I can't say whether they'll be, I'm really engaged. I'm engaged right away. One of the Oregon Farm Bureau's concerns about the Natural and Working Lands Bill, or Senate Bill 1534, was that they weren't engaged as the first draft of the bill was being drafted. And so just within like within the first week of knowing that we had this opportunity to draft a healthy soils bill, I reached out to them right away and have met with the Farm Bureau about the bill, incorporated their feedback, and have a meeting next week with them again to see how they feel about the way that I've restructured things based on their feedback. And so I can't speak for them, of course, that they will support the bill, but I'm hoping that they can either be part of the coalition or feel good enough about it that that there wouldn't be opposition there. And so that partnership is going to be important to the success.
And I think we're good to go with time for questions now. Thank you so much, Megan, for answering so many questions. I think we got most of them in the chat, but feel free to look at that. Thank you, Jesse, for bringing those questions to the table. And thank you so much. Like I said in the chat, this is the first time a larger group like this is hearing about this bill, and we're really excited to engage you all and have your partnership as we move forward. And with that, we're going to move into conversations happening on the federal level with Erin Kaczmarczyk. Erin is the Assistant State Conservationist for Programs for Oregon Natural Resource Conservation Services. She's new to Oregon, but has strong Pacific Northwest roots. She grew up in Washington State and has spent the last 14 years with NRCS in Central Washington. Before NRCS, Erin worked for a conservation district and learned very early in her conservation career the value of building and maintaining strong conservation partnerships. I'm really excited to have her expertise here now in Oregon. And with that, Erin, I'll let you take it from here. Thank you. It's looking good, Erin. I can't see you currently on my screen, so I don't know if you're on or off mute. There you are.
Yeah, it takes a while with multiple screens.
You got it.
Welcome, everybody. Good morning. As Ashley said, I'm Erin Kaczmarczyk. I am new to NRCS Oregon, and I'm filling the role of the Assistant State Con for Programs. I've been with NRCS Oregon since about August, and so I've not seen a full funding cycle in Oregon yet. But I do have a lot of experience with NRCS. I'm going to talk today about, I'm sure the number one burning question on most of your mind right now is the Inflation Reduction Act. There's just not a lot of specifics on this yet. The chief and the deputy chief and everybody is still working on ironing out a lot of the specifics. Same thing with some of the other Farm Bill programs, specifically our initiatives. So just keep that in mind as I go through the presentation today. What IRA does do for us is that it provides $20 billion to support our conservation programs. And it is the largest single investment in climate and clean energy solutions in history, in American history. We're hoping that it's going to yield climate-related benefits while building in resilience in agricultural operations, similar to everything that Megan is trying to do through the Soil Health Initiative. This is just a great dovetail and a great opportunity, again, to just make a large conservation impact on the landscape. These are programs that are well known to farmers and ranchers and are also oversubscribed, meaning we have more applications than we typically can fund. These investments mean that more producers will have access to conservation assistance. And so you can read the numbers, but about 8 billion for the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, which is where we get our individual practice codes that treat the climate-related resource concerns that we have. We also have another 4.9 billion in our CPP. That is a great partnership program. About 3 billion in our conservation stewardship program, which again, there are several enhancements and activities that will focus on, the climate resiliency aspects. About 1.4 billion in our easements program, 1 billion for conservation technical assistance. And in the chief's presentation yesterday, he emphasized that some people may be coming to NRCS's doors, partners and everything, that may not necessarily want a contract or money, but really just want the technical information and assistance that we have. And then there's a 300 million to measure. So it's a monitoring component to see how well things are going as far as quantifying carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas emission reductions from our conservation investments. So going back and basically doing step 9 of the planning process, just seeing how well our activities are impacting beneficially the resource concern. All right, so specifically to Oregon, our EQIP application deadline is going to be due November 18th. Our CSP is a nationally announced program, but typically they announce the application sign up sometime right around March of every year. The CIG proposals, National already made an announcement for their proposals and they were due October 11th, but Oregon NRCS has a state conservation innovation grant period as well, and it's typically announced March, April. A lot of the reason that we have a to be announced deadline is because we're still waiting for all of our funding to show up and what it looks like. And so there are some of these timelines that it's just too early in the fiscal year for us to have at this point, which is why you see a lot of question marks. So just again, be aware, the information will be on our state website as soon as we're able to nail down a date given the information that we find out about funding and new programs. Moving on, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, or RCPP, again, big partner program. Typically those proposals are due about January. So when I was talking to my program lead for RCPP, that's when he thought that was his best guess of when those proposals would be due. ASEP, which again is our Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, which encompasses the wetland reserve easements, the agricultural land easements, and then also the Healthy Forest Reserve Program easements. Those applications, at least the Wetlands Reserve and the ALE, the Agricultural Land Easements, will be due in February of this year. Our national and state initiatives, again, as a result of IRA and just that uncertainty right now as they build the sideboards to that funding and subsequent programs, there's going to be some stuff coming out in the future. We just don't have the crystal ball to be able to tell anybody the specifics regarding new initiatives and specifically like EQIP Conservation Incentive, CIC. That's a program that we typically administer as well, and we were told to hold off on that announcement. So again, there's just a bit of change happening, which is, I think, all positive and in a good way, putting Oregon NRCS in a really good position to get additional conservation on the ground, but we just don't have the specifics to what that looks like right now. NRCS did approve a climate change adaptation plan, which many or some of you may be aware of. I can provide the link to the website for anybody that would like it. I can provide it in the chat if you would like. If you'd like to review the specifics of the climate change plan. This identifies and prioritizes climate vulnerabilities and actions to integrate climate change into our programs, operations, and decision-making. And then it provides a framework that's organized around those 7 main action areas. And It talks about, the different action areas, one being increasing climate literacy and staffing capacity to deliver the assistance that is reflective of climate change, enhance the science, research, and data for understanding, measuring, and tracking climate-related impacts and outcomes, the integration of climate information into current business procedures, assessments, and opportunities, ensuring current and future conservation investments are reflective of climate change needs, assessing and addressing disproportionate climate change impacts on vulnerable communities, strengthening partnerships and collaboration to address climate change, and addressing risks to agency infrastructure. All things that I feel fit very well into this forum and the partnerships here. So climate smart agriculture and forestry, CSAF, you'll hear it called, mitigation activities. NRCS climate smart agriculture and forestry mitigation practices are divided into mitigation categories and delivered through NRCS programs such as EQIP and CSP. And you'll see on there, number one is soil health. We've got nitrogen management, livestock waste management, grazing land management, agroforestry, restoration of disturbed lands, and rice production. All of these are supported, like I said, through some of our additional programs. National has not, again, provided the specifics, but they do have a practice list that they've been working on, but they've made very clear that they will continue to update as new technology comes into play, new recommendations, come out of some of the research that's happening right now. And so that I would say that practice list is not static. It is very much intended to be updated and worked on as new information comes in. So that was very encouraging to hear in the chief's message yesterday. And then additionally, it's on the national website as well. Does anybody have any questions? I can go into a lot more detail about, or a little more detail about RCPP and our conservation innovation grants if people would like. And I can also follow up with individuals if it works out better like that.
Erin, we do have one question that came in. How much of an increase percentage-wise to these programs does the IRA provide?
It really depends on the program, to be quite honest with you. And it's really hard to tell from where I am right now because we don't have 100% of our regular allocation across any of our programs. So that's a little hard to nail down. But going and listening to our national directors and our conference calls, RCPP is seeing a huge funding increase. So that tells you that the chief and everyone else are relying on our partnerships and our partners to help get climate change and climate resiliency addressed, those resource concerns. And so with RCPP receiving a lot of additional funding, primarily in fiscal years 2024, 2025, and there's actually a fair amount in 2026 as well. We just need to make sure that people are talking to NRCS. Our partners are submitting RCPP proposals, that they understand the program. And that's just a really great way to get additional conservation on the ground. Our conservation innovation grants are another really great way to help kind of test tried and true some of the research end of things where, we've got a pretty good idea, or the partner has a pretty good idea of how a particular resource concern can be treated, but they, lack the adequate funding on their own to be able to show or demonstrate that these technologies are going to work. And again, I can provide additional information about the CIG proposals as well.
Okay, and it looks like there's another question. Is a portion of this funding being designated to expanding capacity at local NRCS offices to support program administration and implementation?
can tell you that the chief recognized on yesterday's national all-employee call that there needs to be a hiring, that we can't do this alone with our current staffing. He recognized that we needed to bring more people on board, particularly at the field. Now, what that means specifically for Oregon, I can't tell you, but I can tell you that that is the nationwide message that the chief delivered yesterday. So, you know, I'm not in charge of the field and making those promises, but I can tell you that it is a priority of the chief to ensure that the field has the adequate tools and people to get the work done.
And I think those are all the questions that are in the chat. I will let you know that I put in a link to the climate adaptation plan and the mitigation activities list. Those are already in there. So if there's any other resources that you want to add, go for it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin. It's a lot to ask you to come not even a month into your fiscal year with such a huge influx of funding and lots of question marks. So I really appreciate you being willing to share with us when you're right at this really nascent stage of figuring things out. And ORCAN hopes to be a partner to help share out information as it becomes clearer. So thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And with that, I'm excited to transition into introducing our next pair of speakers, Dallas Hall Defrees and Kelley Delpit. Dallas is the Regenerative Ranching Program Director with Sustainable Northwest. Dallas is a 5th generation cattle rancher with an established career in rangeland ecology and management. Dallas is an engaged, active member of her family's operation. The interface between science and land management is where her passion lies. Dallas's roots in Eastern Oregon, her extensive educational training in rangeland science, and her passion for finding consensus for complex ecological challenges influences her passion for thriving and resilient ecosystem management. And then Kelley is the Klamath Basin manager at Sustainable Northwest. Living and working on her family's cattle ranch in the Upper Klamath Basin has fostered her deep commitment to protecting the livelihoods, lands, and waterways of the region's diverse stakeholders. Kelley brings both practical and academic experience to her role at Sustainable Northwest, having facilitated conservation-oriented solutions to support landowners in the Klamath and John Day Basins, along with a master's in both water policy and education. Really excited to have this powerhouse team present what's happening at Sustainable Northwest right now. And I'll let you go ahead and start to share your screens and maybe get both Kelley and Dallas pinned up for us. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ashley. I think Kelley and I are going to kind of ping pong back and forth in our presentation. So I'm kicking it off. Thanks for that great introduction. I wanted to set the stage a little bit about who Sustainable Northwest is and the type of work that we're doing, as I figure we might not be as notable as NRCS. So I thought I'd just give a brief background. Sustainable Northwest is a nonprofit that looks at natural resource solutions that work for people and nature. We try to bring entrepreneurial solutions to natural resource challenges. Our background has mostly been in water and forestry, but we just created the Regenerative Ranching Program over kind of the past 1.5 to 2 years. So a little bit about the Regenerative Ranching Program. I'm going to go over this really briefly, just to show, you know, where we're at. But basically, we work with ranchers to create a baseline monitoring, looking at all ecosystem services, including water, soil, biodiversity, and bare ground. On these ranchers, or on these individual ranches, we have technical service providers help create land health objectives and associated management actions, and then provide access to experts, try to bridge the gap between landowners and NRCS and SWCDs, especially regionally. We know how integral and important those folks can be for on the ground work. And then we're also building in an educational component that fosters technical training, but also a lot of peer-to-peer learning for ranchers from one another. As some of you may have heard, Sustainable Northwest was lucky enough to receive one of the Climate Smart Commodities grant. And as part of this grant, we are taking this work and going to quantify some of the ecosystem services that we are hoping to move the needle on. One of those things that we're doing is a life cycle analysis. So looking at our greenhouse gas that we're putting out on the ranch level, and then also in kind of a novel finishing pilot where we're trying to integrate a crop rotation system. We're quantifying carbon sequestration. Our program and partner ranches cover just under 7 million acres. So this is predominantly based in Oregon, but we also work with over 120 ranchers across 9 Western states. And then we do follow-up monitoring on the ranch every 5 years, as well as some annual observations just to keep track of things as well. And then as a Climate Smart Commodity Grant, we're looking at increasing access to markets, provide increased communication for regenerative ranching work, not only for other ranchers, but for consumers, and secure market access. And then the thing that I'm going to focus on today is exploring ecosystem service market opportunities. So, as many of you know, there has been kind of a huge shift, especially in consumers, about being more intentional about the type of products that they're buying, that they're looking past the label and thinking, okay, where is this product coming from and what is it doing to the land in which it's produced. I thought this was a really interesting graphic just to show that the popularity of searches in Google for sustainable product in the shopping category has exponentially increased over the last 5 years. This goes to 2020, but I assume that this has continued not only in the USA, but globally. So we're at an interesting intersection, I think, of consumers starting to have a little bit more power driving our products. I should back up and say that I am by no means an expert in this space. The reason that we got into ecosystem service markets is we think it is an avenue to potentially help sustain economic viability for our producers. And because of that, I've done a lot of my own kind of layman research, and I've talked to Ashley about it. And so this is me coming from an area of I'm trying to work on behalf of producers and do outreach and research on their behalf, but I'm not a university. I'm not anything. This is just my own experience. So some of you may have much better insight into some of this than I do, but just wanted to put that little disclaimer in there. So what we're seeing because of this consumer interest is that, you know, a lot of really large companies are starting to make carbon neutral claims by 2030, some by 2050. You can kind of see this great graph of the claims that, you know, really big companies like Nestle and Burger King and Hilton Food Group are making. Cargill is one of them, about what their contribution to greenhouse gases is going to look like in the really near future. 2030 is right around the corner. So because of this, and the other thing I'll say is that there's also science out there that is saying that if we can just slightly improve soil management alone, then we have huge capacity to sequester more carbon in our soils, equivalent to like trillions of gallons of gasoline. You know, I just think that like these numbers here are so interesting. So not only are consumers kind of driving this, but, you know, research is kind of pointing to the fact that there is a possibility that we are missing a really big opportunity to sequester more carbon in our soils. So this has kind of created this really jumbled spider's web of companies saying, okay, we are going to become carbon neutral by this date or reduce carbon emissions by 50% by this date. But in order to do that, we have to have a reference point for being able to quantify carbon. And then, so we have protocols, then there's quantifications, and then there's trading and certifications on a voluntary carbon market. And all of this is not straightforward. And so I'm going to go into a little bit more about what these relationships look like and what this actually looks like for on the ground producers. But I'm going to pass it over to Kelley right now, because we did a pilot project in this space starting in, I think, 2020, but she can talk more about that. So I'll pass it over to her. And this just provides you a little bit more context about where we're coming from.
Thanks so much, Dallas. Appreciate that. Yes, prior to the launch of our regenerative ranching program and bringing on Dallas, who's just been so wonderful at leading this program so far and getting us moving forward. In 2020, we received a conservation innovation grant from NRCS that was the goal of which to secure Oregon rancher access to ecosystem service markets. But as is the theme in a lot of these discussions, and as Dallas alluded to earlier, we found by implementing this project that we're all still learning. We're all still learning. Even the marketplaces that are established as some of the ones on that previous slide, everyone's still learning. So I'll get more into those lessons learned in a moment. But some of the parameters of the project, we worked with Ecosystem Services Marketplace Consortium, always a mouthful. OSU, the soil sampling team out of OSU Extension Hermiston, as well as 4 Oregon family ranches spanning across the state in Wallowa County, Gillum, and 2 ranches down in Klamath, with a total of 450 acres of rangeland enrolled in the project. The objectives were to adapt Oregon-specific carbon sequestration protocol, to implement and monitor the effectiveness of that protocol on the 4 ranches, and ultimately to establish a durable supply chain for enrollment and sale of credits in the ENC marketplace to compensate producers for their adoption of these practices and get them enrolled in the marketplace to receive those financial benefits. There's the project is still ongoing. We're wrapping it up by the end of this year. But some of the accomplishments that we've achieved over the past couple of years, I guess the biggest one is completing a very thorough soil baseline sampling on the 4 ranches. We use the DNDC soil sampling methodology, which required us to do a total of 365 manual soil samples across those 450 acres. And as you see from some of our pictures here, it was a very labor-intensive process. We pounded that soil probe down into the ground 30 centimeters deep, 365 times. And, although that was laborious, it did result in, like I mentioned, a very thorough baseline assessment of the soil health on these 4 ranches. So as these producers move forward, hopefully within our regenerative ranching program, they are very well positioned to be able to monitor the effects of the practices that they've implemented over time. Some of the challenges of that sampling, as I mentioned, aside from sore arms, was that the protocol is really more suited to large-scale row crop agriculture in the Midwest, and not as adaptable to the very varied topography that we encountered in Oregon. So a lot of potential to adapt that soil sampling methodology to suit Western rangelands. Another great outcome for producers was that they were able to implement these 4 new practice changes: rotational grazing, prescribed burns, cover crop, and fencing. And these producers have really enjoyed that process. And my family's ranch is actually one of the ones that have been enrolled in this project. And speaking personally, it's been wonderful to learn more about rotational grazing and the prescribed burn that we applied on our ranch, and to start to see some of the effects of that in our operational and managerial experience. The biggest lesson learned is that, again, this is a pilot project. So we were very much the guinea pigs in ESMC's foray into regenerative climate resilient ranching in Western rangelands. And we all realize that there's a lot of need and potential to adapt the protocol to suit Western rangeland and not as specific to row crop agriculture. So a lot of potential for that adaptability. I think that looking forward, that potential will be expended within our regenerative ranching program and working with the CNB network and Grayswell to adapt that protocol. ESMC, unfortunately, as of this point, has not been able to calibrate the scientific model that would quantify the greenhouse gas and water quality benefits of the practices that these producers implemented in order to validate them and sell them to corporate buyers within the ESMC marketplace. We're waiting on a report for the specific reasons of why that was not able to be completed. But we think it's kind of due to some of the reasons I mentioned, that we're guinea pigs, and that the protocol that ESMC has established so far is really more suited toward large scale row crop ag, and not as easily translatable to the rangelands where we implemented it. So, biggest lesson learned is that we're all still learning. These producers have been so patient and positive in participating and learning with us over the past couple of years. And, my biggest takeaway is that we are all at the forefront of this, and no one's behind. Well, as Dallas and I talked about yesterday, we're kind of all behind. We all want to be farther along, but we're all working toward it together. And this pilot project was a great lesson in that, and learning from ESMC and our producers and OSU, and all of you on this call, to really how can we continue to adapt these our experiences and incorporate them into the existing marketplaces, so we can start providing not only financial benefits for producers, but really leading them toward the most applicable and appropriate resilient strategies to adopt on their properties. So I'll turn it back over to Dallas and field some of the questions I see popping up in the chat about the project later. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Kelley. So from this experience, when I started this job, which was in April, because we're working with landowners specifically about doing actions that would sequester carbon, I started looking into, okay, what ESMC doesn't look like a viable option right now. Are there other options for us? And what I found overall is that there are very limited protocols that can accurately measure carbon in the West at this time. Companies like ESMC or Indigo or Nori are they're trying to do it all. They're trying to be carbon brokers as well as modelers. And what feeds their model is research. And so that's why they are further along in the Midwest, because research has been happening there for longer about how carbon can be sequestered in like row crop soils. Whereas in the West, we're just lagging behind. Our landscape is so much variable. We have more ecotypes. We have, I would argue that I think grazing systems can be more nuanced than farming systems. Somebody will probably tell me I'm wrong about that, but we're just not there yet. We've also found that it's only cost effective for large acreages. At this point, there's one program looking at historic actions, but right now only additive actions can be claimed for carbon sequestration. And again, we're just in the early stages. So I'm going to touch on all these really quickly, and then we can go into questions. But right now, programs other than ESMC or Indigo, like carbon brokers, use Vera. Vera is one of the only protocols out there that is a gold standard that is used for grazing lands. There are few folks who contract with Vera, or who are contractors for Vera. We're working with a man outside of Syracuse University who has done a lot of work for them. We're actually starting another pilot program on a ranch using this, but yeah, right now protocols are mostly, and modeling is mostly occurring in row crop systems. So again, kind of bypassing the West. So the cost of creating a feasibility study as well as putting together a project is really immense. And so I'm going to throw out the 60 to 80,000 acre number out there is kind of a range of where we think projects will start being economically viable, where the amount of credits produced will outpace the cost of implementing practices, and then also doing the monitoring and feasibility study for that project. And so our options there are either work with really large landowners or aggregating properties together. So getting partnering ranches, ideally ranches and similar ecotypes, because then you can kind of spread out your monitoring. But right now, only larger projects are looking good. And a lot of that also has to do with just the Western landscape. Carbon follows water. And when we're looking at rangelands, we're looking at really low areas of precipitation. And so you can imagine, you know, ranchers in Tillamook are going to have a much different scale of carbon sequestration than a rancher in Harney County. So just looking at that, the acreages will also reflect that. Like the ranch in Harney County will probably be larger than the one in Tillamook County, but it's just a different type of carbon sequestration potential. Again, there aren't really historic actions that are currently quantifiable. There is a program called B Carbon that is supposed to be advocating for early adopters in this area, but I haven't worked with them much, and I don't know where they're at. So maybe somebody else on the call does. And then finally, I think ranchers need to be strategic about what they're doing right there. Right now, there really aren't any set precedents for what these contracts look like on ranching lands. Meaning, you know, there aren't, unless you have legal counsel, you know, like I would just warn a rancher, you know, to make sure they know what they're getting themselves into. My conversations so far have been, I've been surprised at how little risk I feel like it is to ranchers to enter into a carbon project. But who knows what that's going to look like in 3 to 5 years. And then, you know, we're also looking at a market, you know, like and so we're beholden to what credit pricing is going to do. We have no control over that. I think right now it's about $15 per ton. That could go up to $40 per ton, or it could go down. And yeah, so that just adds more risk and more nuance to the situation. So with that, Kelley and I can start taking any questions.
Okay, yes, there's a number of questions in the chat. So I'll start with some of the ones that you talked a little bit about in your presentation maybe, and then there's a number of questions related to the Climate Smart Commodities grant. Let's see, has there been any conversation around piloting a soil health or carbon program that can reach smaller acreages by aggregating landowners?
In my there might be some out there. There's a project happening in Montana that has 8 ranchers. They're working with Native Eco and Western Land Exchange, I think. So they're aggregating a project together. As far as from us, I'm working on a pilot project with one, potentially 2 individual ranchers that are larger acreages, and that this is for me to just see, do a litmus test, get our toes in the water to see if it's viable for me to go to smaller acreage landowners and say, if we aggregate, this will be worth it. But there may be others out there that I don't know about.
Ashley, I saw you had your hand up. Were you responding to that question, or did you have a different one? Okay.
Yeah, I thought I could add to that. I know that Nori is a carbon credit company, carbon broker, that's most interested in trying to aggregate some smaller farmers. They still have some of the same challenges in terms of the fact that they're using the COMET model in particular to do a lot of their estimations. And the COMET model, which is an NRCS tool that Corey mentioned during the first session, and I think also at the recent State Connect conference, there was a training on the COMET model, but it is also still primarily geared towards row crops in the Midwest. And there's some challenges with how that's that functionality for Oregon crops, since we have, over 220 different crop types. So there's some challenges there, but Cultivate Oregon, I've been in conversation with them in preparation for this meeting, and they're still trying to work to bring together smaller land acreages with Nori, but again, facing some challenges. And then I think there's been a lot of work done with different agencies and institutions to figure out the aggregation pieces, but it's still just a real challenge because you begin to lose kind of integrity sometimes in the data collected, and there's just a lot of legal challenges there too. But a lot of work is being done in that space, not necessarily for super small farms like a lot of our farm community that really feeds us in Oregon are currently.
Okay, another question that came up is, how does the role of public land leases play into the ranches that will be able to participate?
This is uncharted territory. I know the project that's happening in Montana, one of the ranchers is including their BLM ground, but the relationship there seemed, and this is like a short conversation that I've had. I just don't know if like what's happening there is going to be scaled nationwide. And I assume as these projects become more available, there will start to be some changes happening there on what can happen on public land.
And I'll also add to that, Jeannie Carver, who's located, I believe, in Condon. She has a lot of ranch land throughout several states that her company, Shanico Wool, manages. And they have been piloting a carbon project. That's like one of the few other carbon projects I've heard of in Oregon on rangelands. And I do think that's been a big question mark because they do a lot of public land leasing. And so far, I think that there's some legal constraints or kind of unknowns on behalf of the carbon credit companies and wading into that territory. And I think it's going to add a level of complexity to the issues for sure. I don't know if Kelley has anything else to add there.
Yeah, no, I think, you both alluded to it. It's just early days. I think that there's a lot of potential there. Obviously just in terms of acreage and ownership, well, leasing, but just that precedent hasn't been established yet. I know a lot of the ranches that are in CMB have, we'll work on that as we get to it, but I think it's still early days there. A lot of potential though.
Okay, there's a number of questions related to the CSC funding. So how much CSC funding did Sustainable Northwest receive, and what is the project timeline?
The Regenerative Ranching Program received $10 million over a 5-year timeline. Our other Green Markets program also received a $25 million grant. So we're definitely the little sister in this situation.
So along those lines, will it fund mostly research?
Yeah, a lot of the grant funds a lot of research. It also funds a lot of the technical service and monitoring that will be happening on the ranches. We will be leaning on a lot of federal programs, like especially through the IRA, now that has come through, to help actually do on the ground implementation on the ranches.
What instrumentation do you plan to use to monitor greenhouse gases? So what gases do you plan on monitoring for the CSC grant and other carbon projects?
That's a great question. And I am not the expert. I will not be the one actually doing the monitoring. But for we're partnering with Qantas to do the life cycle analysis. And they have all sorts of metrics to look at different greenhouse gases and what we're doing as far as emissions in that regard. And then the other part of that is we're working with Mark Ritchie with Syracuse University, who's one of the Vera contractors. So he will be doing a lot of soil sampling across all of our ranchers' properties and ecosystems to look, and then also including different practice changes along with those soil samples to look at levels of carbon sequestration.
And do you have intentions to sample deeper than the 30 centimeters for the different projects?
That's a good question. I'd have to go back and look at the protocol. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
I'd love to know, sorry, sampling deeper
No, go
than,
ahead.
I guess if we sample deeper than 30 centimeters, just in terms of practicality, we probably have to look toward more rigorous equipment than what we have now, just from a technical standpoint. Because 30 centimeters is, a pretty deep sample. I think it's certainly possible to get more of it. You need more muscle.
Especially in some of the rocky soils that we deal with in rangeland. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Are you monitoring for more than organic matter in soil sampling?
Yes. We look at, we're doing a Haney test. So looking at soil microbial activity as well as soil organic carbon and soil organic matter, as well as all the other, potassium, phosphorus, all the other like elements and minerals that are in soil. Yes, Mike, I've heard about hydraulic samplers. I think we might need to get one.
We actually had a Giddings, we actually had a Giddings probe all queued up to use for our project, but then it broke down at the last minute. And it was, I think, a blessing in disguise, because given the very steep topography that we were on, it would have been challenging. Talking to some other producers, I think there's, maybe that's what you're referring to with the hydraulic pumps, but rigging it to a side-by-side or a four-wheeler, so you have more mobility and also stability. So a bit of engineering involved, but certainly possible.
Okay, I think maybe last question. We'll see if Ashley, if there's others that you see, but who is studying the relationship of carbon credit markets and profitability in conversion of rangeland to a financial sector product rather than food production resource? It says this trend is already taking place through financial incentive structures such as rain index-based insurance products.
I can touch
Sarah,
on this a little
I don't know
bit.
if Sarah wants to chime in on that.
Yeah, if somebody else has a better example of this,
it's probably an unintelligible question. Sorry. I'm just seeing like there's so much ownership of rangeland changing to be in the financial market as something that investors want to diversify their portfolio. And wealth creates wealth, so their ability to leverage many different products that maybe had a goal of helping producers, but really are just a lot easier to take advantage of if you already have a lot of wealth. So I've seen, like, for example, in the renewable energy sector, wind started out as just being a financial product. So the way that you made money was through the tax credits, not through the energy production. So that's kind of what I'm wondering if people are thinking ahead about that. It's such a powerful systemic force in our current socioeconomic system and difficult. I mean, I love this conversation. Thank you so much. But I just I'm hoping someone out there is thinking about these other unrelated or unintentional impacts.
all I can say is I hope so too, Sarah. I agree with you. It is, I mean, I've heard it said again, and I think people like to say it because they think it's funny, but it is the Wild West. This carbon credits are the Wild West. Often and too often, the person that ends up left behind is the landowner. And we are dealing with huge amounts of money and huge power here. And so how do we make sure that that translates down to the work on the landscape and incentivizing in a healthy and way that it can be in perpetuity? It's not just, you know, one-time incentives or small multi-year incentives or something like that.
I can't think of a better way to end that conversation. That was really well said, Dallas. And thank you so much to Dallas and Kelley for being willing to dive into the wild west of carbon markets in this conversation. I really appreciate your time and also sharing your project when it's also so new with the climate smart commodities opportunity. So thank you so much for doing this hard work of navigating this new territory, and thought you did a fantastic job providing a good pulse on what's happening out there. And I'm excited to share a couple of resources as well that I found as great touchstones to thinking through all of the challenges and opportunities around carbon markets, which we'll send after the session. But the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition has done a nice brief on the challenges of carbon market opportunities for producers. And then there's been a couple of interesting papers that have kind of put together all of these different protocols. You know, Dallas had the slide with all the different companies that are trying to think through this. And there's a paper from Iowa State University and then another one from Environmental Defense Fund. The Iowa State one compares all these different protocols together, so you can get a sense of like, what are the acreage requirements? What are the geographic ranges, which most of them do not have any mention of operating in the Pacific Northwest. And then the Environmental Defense Fund report looks at soil carbon sequestration protocols hyper specifically, does a really great job of breaking down definitions, because there's a whole kind of language that Dallas alluded to a little bit, and breaking down what's happening with carbon markets. And it's a good kind of basis to begin your own examination, because we're really new in this territory, as both Kelley and Dallas pointed out. We are all learning here. And I do have these links like pretty handy, but there's several of them. And so we'll make sure to get those to you all after this call. And with that, thanks again to all of our presenters today. We're going to begin our shift into the regional breakout rooms. Hopefully speakers who are able to stay can stay for that. And today we have a couple of extra minutes. I just want to let you guys know that we don't have a set break right now. So if you need to take a quick break, feel free to do that at any time. Just take care of yourself during these calls. But we'll have regional breakout discussions so that you guys can reflect and really think about how these presentations impact your work on the ground. And so the way that these breakout rooms are going to work is a little bit different, in that you're going to actually pick which breakout room you're going to go into. And I'll work with Emmerich to help set those up. And let's see. We'll have, once you get into the breakout room, you're going to want to make sure that you pick a facilitator and a note taker to be able to walk you through the worksheets that we've put together. We put together some facilitated discussion worksheets for folks who've been part of this. For the previous workshops, you kind of know the drill, but and the agenda that was emailed to you and shared at the top of this call, which maybe Jesse, you could share one more time if you're able to. There's should be links to the worksheets there that you can go in and click through the questions. And for now, I'm going to share the screen that shows the regional work groups that you'll pick. And have I missed anything, Emmerich?
No, I think you've got it. The only thing I'll add is that if you are having issues getting into the breakout room you want to be in once the room's open, just let Ashley and I know, and we can manually move you to the one you want to be in. Also, if for some reason your connection drops, you'll be brought back into the main room when you rejoin, and we can put you back into your breakout room then as well. So I'm going to open these all up now that everyone can see how we're trying to divvy all up so that everyone has a couple conversation partners.
Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you. How did the breakout room go? Do we have some good discussions? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Excellent. Like seeing some thumbs up. Feel free to share in the chat any aha moments that really came through to you that you want us all to hear. I just wanted to say before we close out today, thank you so much for your attention and participation today and each day that you were able to attend. You're going to find resources and recordings from the trainings in the Google Drive that we have, and it will all be linked on our website. We'll be sending up an email probably by next Monday with a survey, so you can tell us all what we can do better next time and what worked for you, and that will also include links to the resources. I just want to say a big thank you to Emmerich Kennard. Big claps to Emmerich for your support and making this session, these sessions every Wednesday work well. Emmerich is our new operations and administrative support with Oregon Climate and Agriculture Network. And thank you so much to Megan Kemple, my other team director, for helping make this all possible. We'll be taking what we learned today and using it to guide our work in the future. Again, we'll be sending out that survey for you all, as well as links to the presentations. ORCAN's mission is to empower a broad producer-centered network to improve soil health across Oregon through collaboration, education, and policy advocacy. And these trainings are an essential thread that really connects the three. We're continuing to get support from Western SARE to continue these trainings into 2023. And so your feedback is even more important so that we can do this well next time. These workshops this fall have felt somewhat broad, right? I took a garden and compost educator class a few years ago, maybe a decade actually ago, and it was well described as a mile wide and an inch deep. And I really feel the same about some of these workshops. It felt really right and timely to take this approach. And now I'm really looking forward to working with you all to figure out how we can go a bit deeper into these topics a little bit more, how we can go a little bit deeper with these regional breakout rooms and start to catalyze some place-based technical assistance where you are. I want to give a huge thanks to the planning team, Amy Garrett, Cheyenne Gahar, Hannah Gosnell, Gordon Jones, and Maud Powell, all from OSU Extension and OSU, Heather Medina Salceda and Corey Owens from Oregon NRCS, Catherine Minthorn from the Northwest Intertribal Ag Council, Jesse Kirshner from Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and Lisa Kilders and Megan Montgomery from Oregon Soil and Water Conservation Districts. And last but not least, thank you all for the work that you're doing to support farmers, to support your communities on the ground. I know it's hard. I know that there are systemic barriers that feel really big to overcome. And there's such an abundance of knowledge, expertise, care, and interest and collaboration that's shown up in this virtual space each Wednesday. And I'm just so excited to see what we can all do when we work together. So thank you so much. And that's a wrap for our workshop Wednesdays. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ashley.